Some of the realities of having one of these cubic mini Grizzlies are that immediately upon lighting it up for the first time, if you didn't read the fine print and burn it for 30 hours outside, is you're going to get a strong paint smell. Yeah, like burning paint. It's a horrible smell. It's not something you want to do inside. I'm in my trailer. I had it installed before I knew to do this. This is my first wood-burning stove, first wood-burning appliance that I installed. And yeah, I'd open all the windows and burn it for weeks in order to lessen that crazy, horrible, toxic paint smell. Not ideal, but if you're paying attention, you will not have made that mistake. So that's one of the first realities. Another one is, again, all the pictures of this thing online, there's nice flame coming through this window here. This window immediately, for me anyway, I don't know if there's a way to prevent this, but it just turned black. So like, sometimes that peels off and you can actually see your fire, but for the most part, you're just looking at a black piece of glass with maybe like this stuff chips off. I don't know if you can see that this stuff is sort of chipping off here. You can kind of see through it. It flakes off. That probably just fell to the ground. But yeah, you can sort of get a sense that then you can sort of see through this little hole, but you're not looking at a, you know, beautiful flame the whole time you're operating your Grizzly. Most of the time, you're looking through this, like, kind of, I don't know what that is. Ash, creosote, I don't know what it is. But it builds up on the glass, and I don't know how to keep the glass clean. It's not something that is easy to do with this stove. Another reality is that, yeah, when it gets really hot, you need to manage the temperature, especially of the top of it, or it's going to smell. I've been using my stove for a full season, and if it gets too hot, paint smell, like nasty paint smell. One way that I was able to mitigate that is I have a small pot. I put that on top, full of water, and I think that just helps the top of the stove, which gets the hottest, not to get super, super hot. It kind of mitigates that that paint smell, and I'm off-grid, so it's nice to have hot water on demand when I'm using my stove anyway for tea, coffee, dishes, whatever I'm doing there. So it's not a big issue just to keep some water up top. Another reality is this thing doesn't actually output all that much heat. I'm in a 35-foot trailer, and it struggles to heat this space. If I was in a trailer half that size, it might be adequate, but I thought that I would be able to just make this thing quite hot, and it would do the job. It really doesn't. This fan up top does an okay job of pushing the heat to, you know, it'll get like 10 feet or so, but unless your space is quite small, this isn't big enough. So yeah, don't expect this thing to heat larger spaces, especially in the colder months. Really, quite literally stick to their guidelines of the heating capacity. I just ignored them, so that mistake is mine. But yeah, it's not going to do much bigger than like, I don't know, a space that's 10 by 15, I would say, is kind of 10 feet by 15 feet is probably on the upper end of what I would expect it to do. Another reality is lighting this thing. There's a ton of smoke that's going to come out. Like, I don't know if you can see that it's smoking right now. It's probably hard to tell, but anytime you open the door, lots and lots of smoke is going to come out. And I only have, yeah, like 6 or 7 feet of pipe, and it's straight pipe right out the top of there. So it's not like my chimney is complicated or bent or, you know, exiting out a sidewall or anything like that. It's just this thing, there's a lot of smoke that's going to come out into your space, so you're going to have the windows open a lot when you're messing around with lighting and changing the, putting new fuel in the fire, which brings me to the next point. It's quite hard to manipulate anything in there. You're going to want a set of tongs. Like, I had pokers and stuff, traditional fire implements. Just get a pair of just like these cheap dollar store tongs. that's going to be by far your best tool for working with this stove. So you can reach in there and let's see if I can get a view of like kind of what my process is, just because this is not obvious that you would want to have to like do this kind of thing, but being able to really articulate these logs inside is going to be pretty important. And then this brings me to the next point, which is it's quite hard to get a fire going in there because typically you're able to use small fuels and like a lot of them and get the fire going to burn the bigger fuels, but because of the your limitation on space, it's more like operating a smoker than it is a traditional fire burning appliance. Like if I'm lighting a fire in a fireplace, a bunch of paper, small kindling or twigs, slightly larger stuff, and then, you know, logs on top of that. I just don't have the real estate in there to build such a structure, so it's going to burn through that small stuff quite quickly before really igniting anything more substantial. So what I do is I have pieces that are, you know, this big or so, and I'll build a cabin out of these really little bits of log. I'll have some newspaper in there, and then I'll have some twigs kind of nested into all that stuff. And then instead of using a match, I have a torch. So I'll light my fire like this, which is very much reminiscent of like how somebody is gonna start a fire in a wood smoker barbecue. Like they've got that offset smoker chamber. They're using a torch to light that instead of messing around with matches and paper and stuff. So another one of the realities of the Cubic Mini Grizzly is, yeah, it's hard to get a fire going if you're not like an experienced fire builder. Have a pretty decent little torch on hand. The one I have here is the it's like a, what's that, a Burn-Some-Matic propane with the head that threads just right onto that propane cylinder. And obviously keep that thing far away from your stove when operating it, because last thing you need is to explode a propane cylinder at all, ever, anywhere. So I hope those are in any way useful for you if you're considering buying one of these things. You can see it's smoking quite a bit. I will close that up. For me, the main points, and here you're going to get a sense of kind of that blackness now that there's better flame in there, but you'll see better that kind of what your view is actually going to look like is that sort of soot, I guess that's the word for it, that builds up on the glass. I do have a fan up there, which is helpful. I used all that shielding that is provided very handily by Cubic Mini. But overall, like, the install was quite tricky. But yeah, what's my honest feedback on this thing is I would have gone with just a real wood burning appliance, just a small wood burning stove with a longer chamber that I could feed with logs that aren't tiny. Oh, that's another I almost forgot this reality of things is you're not going to burn anything even this big. Like, this is too big for that. It's already a little burnt. This is too large for this stove. I don't know if you can get a sense of scale here. You're going to be burning small fuel, and you're going to be burning it frequently, because that fire will go out in 20 minutes. You got to feed it all the time with small fuel, and you got to play with the dampers to keep the heat from getting too high. You got to, and like I said, put a pot of water up top as a heat sink to keep the stove from getting too hot and releasing that paint smell. So it's kind of a finicky dance of like, well, I want the heat, I want to heat my space, but I don't want the stove to get too hot and fill my space with chemically burning paint smell. Yeah, this video is going on way too long. I think you get a sense of sort of the high maintenance nature of running a stove like this. Like, it's not a set it, forget it like thing. It's more like, if you don't have any other options, like electric heaters or some kind of a furnace or propane, you know, most RV campers are going to have some kind of like I don't know, natural gas or propane furnace, probably propane furnace, and the ability to plug into utility power to run electric heaters, like those are better options than running one of these. If you have no other choice, and if you have a really small space, and if you're okay with constantly maintaining, feeding this thing, emptying the ashes every single time, if you're burning this throughout the day, you're actually going to have to empty the ashes at some point because they build up so quickly. Yeah, if you're okay with all that, it'll work. Like it'll heat a very small space. But yeah, would I buy this thing again? I don't think I would.